the war in Northern Uganda has been one of the wars that many people do not want to talk about because it has a lot of impact on the populations. First of all, you know, when we talk of Northern Uganda, we were part of the country which was acting as the food basket for the entire East Africa. All the food used to come from Northern Uganda because the climate of Northern Uganda, I think, is the best in the world. And there came this conflict that interrupted everything, that buried everything.
Since the late 1980s, the West has come to see Uganda as a model African nation. Economic initiatives have been greatly praised. HIV education policies have been universally applauded. In the north of Uganda, during that same 2 decades, Yoweri Museveni's government has been in a bitter military conflict with a rebel group known as the Lord's Resistance Army. The conflict officially began in 1986, when the first northern rebel movement took up arms against the southern-based Museveni. But the deeper roots of this north-south divide can be traced back to the late 1800s, during what was called by the imperial European powers the scramble for Africa. Britain cut the largest piece of African cake from Cairo to Cape Town, in addition to Nigeria and a few West African regions. It was also the British Empire that in 1894 imposed an arbitrary boundary around the many diverse ethnic groups and kingdoms that would make up Uganda. The southern Bantu-speaking people were given economic, political, and educational advantage. The northern ethnic groups, 2 in particular, the Acholi and the Langi, were the main recruits for military and police positions. By exploiting linguistic, ethnic, and cultural differences between the peoples of the North and South, Britain's divide and rule policies created a tension between them that helped maintain British rule. It was this colonial legacy that Uganda carried forth into its independence in 1962. Milton Obote, a northerner, was named Uganda's first prime minister. In 1971, Obote was overthrown by his top military commander, the notorious Idi Amin. It was Milton Obote who returned to power. In opposition, Museveni disappeared into the bush and formed the rebel National Resistance Army. Museveni rebels took power in 1986. Although several northern rebel groups formed in opposition to Museveni, only one had a spiritual component.
God is very difficult to predict. For him, he's a prophet, he cannot be advised. His advice comes from the spirit.
The inhumane terror of the Lord's Resistance Army, combined with the unrelenting military response of the Museveni government, has proved catastrophic for northern Ugandans, the Acholi people in particular. The Museveni government has forcibly displaced 1.5 million people into camps, the majority of them women and children. The Lord's Resistance Army has abducted more than 25,000 children to be used as soldiers, workers, and sex slaves.
Right now, if you listen to the international news, the LRA moved from Uganda to the DRC, that is Garamba, and then later were pushed out by the UPDF, Uganda People's Defense Forces, and the forces of the Congo Army, the Republic of Congo, into the Central African Republic, where they've continued to hack havoc and kill, mutilate people in the Central African Republic. But Northern Uganda is relatively peaceful. People are going on with their daily lives. Farming is going on. The government is also trying to reconstruct the area with the help of the international community.
One is corruption. That is because when you look at in terms of figure, the money that the donor community send into Northern Uganda, you couldn't believe. But when you go in the ground and look at the impact, you don't see anything. When you look at the government programs aimed at rehabilitating or actually building up Northern Uganda, in terms of figure, you cannot believe it. But it's very difficult for that money to actually come down, trickle down to the real beneficiaries or to the community.
For 25 years, just one man has occupied the Ugandan seat of power, the State House behind me. Mr. President, your opponents say you have presided over a corrupt government and there is currently no political will to tackle it. In the past, you have taken action, but only selectively.
Stealing your money was the least of the problems we had. Top of the list was the stealing of lives of human beings. People are being slaughtered like chicken. Destroying the economy. Destroying the animals in the national parks through poaching by soldiers. Looting people on the highways by soldiers. All these were stopped. By whom? Not by those fellows in the opposition. They were stopped by the NRM.
The problem right now is that all parts of the world are suffering from global shocks of high food prices, which is a huge part of the Ugandan purchasing basket, and also high oil prices.
In terms of poverty in Northern Uganda, people of Northern Uganda is still in a condition of absolute poverty. Despite the fact that a number of them already gone back to their home of origin, no longer living in the IDP camp, but they are still at the process of resettling. And they are still in the process of regaining, building their homes and the rest of it.
The Peace, Recovery and Development Program for the North was launched in October 2007 and implementation began in July 2008. The overall goal of PRDP is consolidating peace and security and laying a foundation for recovery and economic growth in the region after decades of war.
I am happy to note that the poverty levels that stood at 61% for Northern Uganda during the financial year 2005-2006 improved tremendously to 46% during the financial year 2009-2010. We've been able to eliminate the terrorist threat, which has resulted into the stability of the North, and the people of Northern Uganda are now settled and engaged in improving their livelihoods.
Close to $600 million has been committed to different projects in the region. Even then, the North has remained the poorest in the country, and this is due to several challenges, especially poor infrastructure.
There is still a problem of land conflicts, especially in Acholi, where there was a high percentage of displacement.
The opportunities we have in Uganda right now is the discovery of the oil. I believe if handled well, with accountability for it, then I think the country has a chance to develop.
The people of Northern Uganda currently depend majorly on farming at the subsistence level. That means hand-to-mouth productions, because they don't have the capacity to produce for market yet.
Now, what can Uganda do about that? One is focus on agriculture, help get food prices down, achieve food self-sufficiency through better yields in agriculture. This is that green revolution that I think is very, very important.
Because Uganda solely relies on agriculture for its development. 80% of our gross national product and 80% of our foods or the population depend on agriculture. So I strongly believe if agriculture is modernized, if our farmers are trained, if we have modernized seeds, if we have machineries to help diversify agriculture other than relying on the subsistence level, then the country can develop, because then we are able to produce food in bulk, in big amount that we shall consume and then export others, where we're able to receive high revenue in return for the foods that we have produced.